Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I want to take a few minutes to explain what I believe is one of the biggest legal issues in the EWU media public records case. And it's a question that could determine whether many of the requested records are even subject to disclosure. If you're new to the channel, this case is EWU Media LLC versus City of Moscow and the Moscow Police Department. EW Media is suing to obtain investigative records related to the Brian Koberger investigation under Idaho's Public Records Act after the city denied or withheld portions of its public records requests. I'll include a Google Drive link in the description box below containing the court filings and other documents I've obtained through public records requests so you can review them for yourself. One of the main issues in the case comes down to one word: custodian. In a supplemental response, the City of Moscow argues that it is not the custodian of many of the records that EW is requesting, because those records were created and maintained by other agencies, including the FBI, the Pennsylvania State Police, and law enforcement agencies in Washington. Idaho Code Section 74101, subsection 3 defines a custodian as the person or persons having personal custody and control of the public records in question. The city also relies on Idaho Code Section 74103, subsection 1, which provides that all requests to examine public records shall be made to the designated custodian of such records. Based on those statutes, the city argues that simply possessing copies of FBI or other agency records does not make Moscow the legal custodian. The city's position is that it does not have the authority to determine whether another agency records can be released. In other words, the FBI remains the custodian of FBI records. Pennsylvania agencies remain the custodian of Pennsylvania records, and Washington agencies remain the custodians of records that they created. However, EWU's argument raises a separate question under Idaho's Public Records Act. The Act defines a public record under Idaho Code Section 74101, subsection 13, as any writing that is prepared, owned, used, or retained by a local agency. The threshold question, therefore, is whether the city is the custodian of the records petitioner seeks. But the city's argument does not stop there. It raises a second issue. It argues that even if the court determines Moscow is the custodian of these records, many of them are still exempt from disclosure under Idaho Code Section 74104, subsection 1, paragraph A. That provision states that a public record is exempt from disclosure if it is protected by federal law, state law, or federal regulations to the extent specifically provided by those laws or regulations. In other words, just because a record is considered a public record, it doesn't automatically mean it has to be released. If another federal or state law protects it, the city argues it can still withhold it. So now the court must therefore resolve some questions. First, is the city of Moscow the legal custodian of investigative records created by other agencies when those records are shared with, retained by, and used by Moscow during the Koberger investigation? Second, assuming Moscow is the custodian of the records, do federal law or the laws of the other states provide a basis for exempting those records from disclosure under Idaho Code? The court's ruling on these questions could shape how Idaho agencies handle shared investigation records for years to come, and I'll continue to follow this case as it develops. And I just want to say thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you on the next video.